You know the feeling. The final exam is tomorrow, and you simply have to pass. But your hands are on a keyboard playing a video game until 3 o'clock in the morning. Or maybe the deadline for a huge project is breathing down your neck. Yet you find yourself scrolling through TikTok, telling yourself you just need a 5-minute break, but that break turns into 3 hours. This is self-sabotage. It is the act of actively undermining your own goals. We often see it as procrastination, but it also shows up in subtle ways like imposter syndrome. It's the fear of being exposed as a fraud, and that fear can make you sabotage the very opportunities you deserve. But here's the thing, what all these behaviors have in common is that they aren't just happening to you. There's strategies deployed by you against you. And if you feel this way, I want you to know that you're not the exception. You're the rule. The numbers are actually pretty stunning. Studies show that anywhere from 62 to 82% of people will experience imposter syndrome at some point. And in university settings, up to 95% of students admit to having a problem with procrastination. Self-sabotage isn't reserved for a few dysfunctional people. It's part of our brain's factory settings, but we don't all experience it in the same way. Think of it like a spectrum. On the far right in the red zone, you have chronic life-altering patterns that repeat no matter the situation. For about 15 to 20% of adults, this is their reality. And sometimes this is linked to neurobiological differences like ADHD that make these patterns really hard to break. But the vast majority of us, probably 60 to 80%, live in the gray zone. We're mostly fine. But when the stakes get high, when we face a big challenge, we suddenly start doing the very things that guarantee we'll fail. So no matter where you are on that spectrum, the goal of this video is to help you start moving to the left. And to do that, we first have to understand the underlying code that runs this entire system. You might be asking if this is part of our factory settings. If almost everyone does this, there has to be a reason for it, right? We usually think of the brain as a simple pleasure, seeking system, always chasing a dopamine hit. But the truth is, your brain is a prediction machine first and a pleasure machine second. From an evolutionary perspective, its primary job isn't music to make you happy. It's to keep you alive. And to do that, it needs to predict exactly what is coming next. So it constructs an internal model of your reality. In the past, for your survival, this was mostly about your physical environment. But today, it also includes your identity and your sense of worth. To make this easy to visualize, I want you to imagine a simple graph in your mind. On the vertical axis, you have your competence, or your brain draws a flat line across this graph. This is your internal baseline. It represents exactly how good or how safe your brain expects things to be. And the brain's biggest fear, a fear far greater than failure, is the terror of finding out that this line is in the wrong place. When the reality of the external world moves away from that line, it tears open a gap. This vertical gap is called a prediction error. And to your primitive brain, that gap signals danger. Self-sabotage, in all its strange forms, is a strategy your brain uses to close that gap. This plays out in two main ways. The first path is common in people with high but fragile self-esteem. Your internal baseline is set very high. It says I am or I should be highly competent, but the external world is full of messy, uncertain data. Things like exams and performance reviews might prove otherwise. That creates a gap between your high expectation and the messy reality. So what do? You refuse to let the data be collected. You engage in behavioral self-handicapping. Maybe you stay up all night or drink before the big presentation, or start the project at the last minute. It's basically a clever protective shield. If you fail, you can just blame the handicap. I failed because I was tired. But if you succeed, you get to believe you're a genius. I succeeded even though I was tired. By sabotaging your performance, you protect that high baseline from ever being disproven. The second path is common for those of us with lower self-esteem, the ones who struggle with imposter syndrome. Here, your internal baseline is set very low. It says, I'm not good enough, I'm a fraud, but then the external world gives you a promotion, or someone gives you a heartfelt compliment. Suddenly, the reality line shoots way up above your baseline. This sudden success is a massive prediction error. The world is telling you that you're valuable, but your baseline says you're worthless, and that gap feels incredibly unsafe. So you do what is called claimed self-handicapping. You might constantly tell people you're feeling sick or overwhelmed before a big task. It lowers their expectations, sure, but the cost is that you slowly train everyone around you to see you as fragile and unreliable. You are trading your long-term potential for a moment of immediate safety. It is a retreat to the familiar pain of not being good enough, simply because your brain prefers a predictable failure over a terrifying, uncertain success. And here's the frustrating part. Even when you understand all of this, even when you see the pattern and you desperately want to change, why does it still feel impossible? Why can't you get your body to do the thing you logically know you should do? Because this isn't just a psychological game. In the end, it's a battle of biology. When that gap on the graph appears, your brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, can sound the alarm. It sees the uncertainty as a danger to your identity. So it basically shoves your rational brain out of the driver's seat to take control of the wheel. You're in fight or flight mode now. And at the same time, your brain's brake pedal, a region called the right inferior frontal gyrus or RIFE, is supposed to step in music and stop you from doing something impulsive. For people who struggle with this, that brake pedal feels like it's covered in a thick layer of sponge. You have to press down with much more force to get it to work. So you end up in this terrifying situation. Your panic has taken the wheel and the brakes are too soft to stop the car. It feels like you're hurtling toward a cliff and you've completely lost the ability to slow down. The people who've overcome this didn't eliminate fear. They just found a way to calibrate their internal baseline to match reality so the alarm doesn't ring so loud. And that is our goal. The question is, how do we do that? Let's be clear, you don't need to buy a $300 course or download a complex new productivity app. Unless you're in a clinical zone requiring medication, most of us can start rewiring this with something you probably already have, a pen and a notebook. We're going to use the simple act of writing. Oh, gently guide the brain back to a place of safety and control. We'll do this in 3 steps. Step 1 is retaking the wheel. Before we act, we have to move the emotions out of the driver's seat. When you feel that wave of anxiety or that urge to procrastinate, open your notebook. Just write down what you're feeling. For example, I'm feeling a tightness in my chest. I'm having the thought that I will fail. This is called cognitive diffusion. When you keep these thoughts in your head, you are the emotion. But the moment you write them down, you step out of the feeling. You become the observer. You can name the emotion or even draw it as a character like in the movie Inside Out. Whether you write it or draw it, the result is the same. You create a tiny distance between you and the fear. And that distance, you create a tiny distance between you and the fear. And that distance, it lets your rational mind grab the wheel. Again, step 2 is bypassing the broken brake. Now that you're back in the driver's seat, we've still got a major mechanical problem. Even with your rational mind, your internal brake pedal is still physiologically weak. Relying on brute force willpower to stop the sabotage is just going to exhaust you. We need to be smarter about it. Here are 3 tools we can use, depending on what kind of sabotage you're facing. First, if you're the perfectionist who is paralyzed by the fear of not being good enough, try the bad draft protocol. This is a technique called paradoxical intention. Write this at the top of your page. For the next 20 minutes, my only goal is to write the absolute worst, most embarrassing garbage imaginable. By making bad the goal, you remove the fear of failure. Your amygdala stops ringing the alarm because you can't fail at writing garbage. It tricks your brain into starting, and usually you'll find that what you create is an actually garbage, but by then you already have the momentum to keep going. Second, if you're a procrastinator who gets distracted easily, use the WOOP method. This stands for wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan. Write down your wish and the best outcome. But then, and this is the crucial step that most people skip, write down the obstacle. Be brutally honest. The obstacle is that the moment I get home, I collapse on the couch and scroll on my phone. Then turn that obstacle into a plan using an if-then statement. If I walk through the door, then I'll immediately put my phone in a drawer. By rehearsing this scenario, you're writing a script for your brain. You preload the decision. So when the moment comes, you just run the code. Now, those first 2 tools were about working around the weak brake to get you started. But this third tool is different. This is how we actually strengthen the brake pedal itself. It's called urge surfing. Use this when you feel that specific physical heat in your body that screams run away or check your phone. When that impulse hits, don't fight it. just track it. Grab your pen and write down. The urge is an 8 out of 10 right now. I feel it as a heat in my face. Wait 2 minutes and check in again. Okay, now it's a 6. These physiological urges are like waves. They build, they peak, but they always crash within about 20 minutes. And by riding that wave and not acting on it, you're doing a rep in the gym for your brain. You're training that brake pedal to handle physical urges just like step 1 helped you handle the emotional ones. So the next time you need to stop, you'll find it's a little bit easier. Step 3 is the final step. And it's the most critical, closing the gap. The tools we just covered help in the moment. But for real and lasting change, we need to adjust that baseline we talked about earlier. We need to gather accurate data from the real world so we can calibrate your internal expectations to match reality. We do this with behavioral experiments. The goal here is to find accurate external data points. Instead of assuming you'll fail, treat it like a scientific test. Write down a hypothesis like if I show my work before it's perfect, people will think I'm incompetent. Then run the test. Take an idea or a project that is not even 80% done. Share it with a trusted friend or a colleague for feedback. Don't polish it. Just send it and watch what happens. Did they ridicule you, or did they just give you the feedback you needed to finish? You're teaching your brain that in progress doesn't mean incompetent. Now that you have collected this new data, we need to calibrate your internal baseline. You can use Socratic questioning. When that inner voice says, I'm incompetent, write it down and put it on trial. Ask, is there really no evidence that I'm competent? What about that last project I finished? Force your brain to look at the wins it's trying to ignore. Think of it like being a lawyer for the defense. You're building a solid case to prove you're worthy. And the most crucial part of balancing that graph is this. We need to change how you define a mistake. In your notebook, practice retribution. When things go wrong, instead of writing, I'm such an idiot, I always mess this up. Right? And this is just data I can learn from. When you treat a mistake as information instead of a character flaw, the brain stops seeing it as a threat. The alarm bells don't ring music and the need to self-sabotage just vanishes. Okay? So let's put all the pieces together. Here's the path out of the cycle. First, you manage the emotion so you can think. Then, you bypass the unreliable brake so you can act. And finally, you calibrate the baseline so you could stop fighting a war against yourself. I know this sounds like a lot, but remember, you don't have to do it all at once. If you're not sure where to begin, just start with step 1. Open your notebook and simply write down the emotion you're feeling right now. And as always, I've created a free PDF for you with templates for all of these writing exercises. You can download it using the link in the description below. I want you to imagine that spectrum again. Maybe today you feel like you're on the far right end, but every time you pick up that pen, every time you surf an urge or give yourself permission to be imperfect, you're taking music one small step to the left. You're closing the gap and proving to your brain that the world is actually safer than it thought. This isn't about becoming a different person. It's about slowly, gently taking back the wheel. Thanks for watching. I hope this gives you something useful you can actually try. Next time, we're going to explore how this same system of self-sabotage shows up in our closest music relationships. But until then, take care. I'll see you in the next one.